The roar of the Galactic Coliseum still echoed through the air, the metallic scent of ionized plasma and scorched earth lingering long after the final strike had been made. Vance exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He and his team had come into this arena as underdogs, cannon fodder, entertainment for a bloodthirsty crowd. Now they stood as victors. And yet, despite the sheer improbability of their success, something even stranger had happened. The galaxy's mightiest warrior, the undefeated overlord X-Y, had not only yielded but had acknowledged humanity's strength. Sienna clutched her side, wincing as she examined the remains of her hack battle drone. Well, she panted. That wasn't terrifying at all. Jonas, ever the historian, wiped a streak of dust from his face. That was the first recorded instance of a non-Craxan forcing a surrender from their overlord in a sanctioned duel. He grinned despite himself. We just rewrote the history books. Sparky, still buzzing with adrenaline, leaned against a cracked support beam. More importantly, we lived. He gestured toward the cheering audience. And these folks, I don't think they decided whether to worship us or be very afraid. Vance turned to X-Y, who stood watching them in unreadable silence. The warlord had already recovered from his moment of weakness, his towering form still radiating authority. But there was a subtle shift in his posture. Less arrogance, more curiosity. I misjudged your kind, X-Y finally said. Strength alone does not define warriors. You have shown me this truth. Vance met the warlord's gaze, recognizing the significance of the statement. It wasn't just admission of defeat. It was an invitation. A door had opened. A new status for humanity. The announcer's voice cut through the noise, artificially amplified. By right of trial, humanity is recognized as a warrior species. The crowd exploded into cheers and jeers, the sheer mix of emotions making it impossible to tell if they were celebrated heroes or newly minted threats. Sienna exchanged a glance with Jonas. Well, that just happened. X-Y turned toward the massive high-ranking officials seated in the council chambers overlooking the arena. The humans have proven their worth. His mandibles clicked as he scanned the assembled dignitaries. Let it be known that I, Overlord X-Y, recognize their strength. There was a beat of silence before one of the council speakers, a reptilian Torvas elder, leaned forward. Humanity has been an unknown, a species deemed too weak to participate in the affairs of warriors, he rasped. His golden eyes narrowed. And yet here they stand. The murmurs of the crowd turned into heated discussions, and Vance could see the political machinery already spinning into motion. Recognition as a warrior race wasn't just about pride. It was about influence, alliances, and survival. And the galaxy had just learned that humans were a problem they could no longer ignore. A private conversation. As the arena's energy dimmed and the crowd's enthusiasm turned to betting on future matches, X-Y motioned for Vance to step aside. The two warriors, once enemies, now stood as something else. I will offer you advice, Captain, X-Y said. You have forced the galaxy to take notice. Some will seek alliances. Others will seek your destruction. Vance nodded. He had suspected as much. The moment humanity stopped being overlooked, it became a threat. We can handle ourselves, he said. X-Y mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. Perhaps. He paused, glancing toward the human team. Your kind fights differently. You do not seek conquest, nor do you rely solely on force. You adapt. You deceive. You turn weaknesses into strengths. His gaze darkened. That terrifies the old powers. Sienna folded her arms. Let me guess. The same old powers that thought this fight would be a joke. X-Y gave a slow, deliberate nod. Jonas exhaled. Fantastic. We didn't just win. We made enemies. Sparky chuckled. Wouldn't be the first time. X-Y turned back to Vance. Do not mistake this victory for security. The battle you fought today is nothing compared to war for your species' future. Vance had always known that earning respect was only the first step. Keeping it was another battle entirely. Departure and a new beginning. Hours later, The human team boarded their war barge, the looming spires of the Colosseum fading behind them as they left the orbit of the gas giant. Jonas stretched, groaning. Well, I can safely say that was the most physically, mentally, and existentially stressful experience of my life. Sienna smirked. Welcome to intergalactic diplomacy. Sparky dropped into a seat, kicking his feet up. So what's next? Do we bask in our newfound fame? Get offered ridiculous sums of money to fight in underground tournaments? Vance stared out at the stars. No, his voice was calm, steady. Now we prepare. Sienna frowned. For what? For whatever comes next. Because humanity had just shaken the foundations of the galactic order. And whether the stars welcomed them as warriors, allies, or threats, one truth remained. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The arena floor shifted once more, retracting the remains of the previous trials. The crowd, now fully invested in this unexpected spectacle, roared with anticipation. What had started as a joke, a band of fragile humans sent to amuse the masses, had transformed into something else. They had survived, and now they would face Overlord X-Warthak himself. A deep metallic chime echoed through the Colosseum, signaling the final trial. The warlord rose from his throne, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the battlefield. X-Warthak had been amused before. He was not amused now. The warrior enters the arena. X-Warthak descended onto battlefield, each step shaking the ground beneath him. His forearms flexed, the chitinous plating along his limbs shifting with lethal precision. Twin plasma blades ignited in his upper hands, their violet glow casting eerie reflections across his battle-worn armor. His lower arms held a massive graviton hammer, its energy core pulsating with barely contained destruction. The announcer's voice boomed once more. Final trial. Combat against Overlord X-Warthak. Defeat means death. Sparky let out a low whistle. So, anyone got a plan that doesn't involve die horribly? Vance exhaled, his pulse steady despite the impossibility of the situation. This wasn't about strength. Humanity had never survived on brute force alone. We're not going to outmatch him, Vance said, eyes scanning the battlefield. We need to outthink him. Jonas adjusted his stance, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. We're up against an overconfident warlord with predictable fighting style. I'd say history is on our side. X-Warthak didn't wait for them to strategize. With a guttural roar, he charged forward, his plasma blades cutting through the air with blinding speed. The battle begins. Vance barely dodged the first strike. The sheer force of the blade's swing sent a shockwave rippling through the dust and debris. Sienna, already adapting, barked orders. He's overcommitting. If we can force him to keep swinging, he'll leave openings. Jonas took off in a sprint, flanking left. Right. Let's make this guy work for his victory lap. Sparky, grinning like a madman, lobbed a concussion grenade at X-Warthak's feet. The explosion kicked up a cloud of dust, momentarily blinding the warlord. But it wasn't enough. X-Warthak roared, slamming his graviton hammer into the ground. A shockwave pulsed outward, sending all four humans flying backward. Vance hit the ground hard, pain lancing through his ribs. He rolled, just in time to avoid a follow-up strike that cratered the earth where he had just been, exploiting the weakness. Jonas scrambled to his feet, watching X-Warthak's movements like a scholar studying an ancient text. He favors high, sweeping strikes with his blades and uses his hammer to create space. Jonas observed. That means he's expecting us to fight like other gladiators, stronger, slower opponents. Sienna's mind raced. Then we don't fight like warriors. Vance nodded. We fight like humans. They switched tactics. Instead of engaging directly, they kept moving, forcing X-Warthak to chase them, to waste energy swinging at empty space. Sparky threw a series of flash charges, each detonation sending bursts of blinding white light into the warlord's multiple vision receptors. Sienna hacked a fallen battle drone, reprogramming its core to emit a feedback pulse, disrupting X-Warthak's motion sensors. And Jonas? Jonas baited him. He darted in close, deliberately mimicking the footwork of ancient dueling masters, just long enough to lure XY into overextending, then diving away as the warlord's blade sliced through nothing but air. The crowd was silent now. They weren't just surviving. They were winning. The final gambit. XY snarled, his patience eroding. He switched tactics, gripping his graviton hammer with all four arms, preparing to end the fight in one devastating strike. Sienna's eyes widened. If that hammer lands, we're all dead. Vance's mind raced. A direct hit was out of question. They needed to turn the warlord's own strength against him. Sparky, set charges on my mark. Sienna, get ready to trigger that drone's overload. Sparky grinned. I love when you get reckless. Jonas dashed forward first, drawing XY attention. The warlord swung the hammer down with all his might. But at the last second, Jonas rolled aside, and the hammer slammed into the earth instead. The instant it made contact, Sienna triggered her hack drone, sending a disruptive energy pulse straight into the warlord's own weapon. The graviton hammer's energy core destabilized, its force ricocheting backward instead outward. XY staggered, his own attack turning against him, the kinetic shock wave ripping through his armor. Before he could recover, Sparky detonated a final charge beneath his feet, sending the warlord crashing to his knees. The Colosseum fell into stunned silence. For the first time in his long, undefeated reign, XY was on the ground. Vance, breathing hard, took a step forward, plasma pistol raised. He could end it now, but instead, he lowered his weapon. Yield, he said. The warlord lifted his gaze, his expression unreadable. He could fight on, but he knew he had lost. A long pause stretched across the arena. Then, with deliberate finality, XY drove his own blade into the earth. A gesture of surrender. The silence broke into a deafening roar. They had done it. They had won. A warrior's respect. XY rose, his imposing figure towering over Vance, but there was no hatred in his gaze. Instead, there was something else. Respect. You are unlike any opponent I have faced, the warlord rumbled. You fight not with strength alone, but with cunning, with adaptability. I underestimated you. Vance nodded, his muscles aching from the battle. A lot of people do. XY turned to the audience, raising one of his swords in salute. Let it be known across the stars, humanity is not weak. The crowd, once baying for their blood, erupted into cheers. And in that moment, humanity's place among the warrior races of the galaxy was secured. The Galactic Coliseum was an architectural impossibility. Miles of shifting terrain, plasma barriers that bent physics to their will, and environmental hazards that could obliterate a being in seconds. The crowd, millions strong, surged in anticipation, their collective excitement vibrating through the metal underfoot. In the center of it all stood Captain Elias Vance and his team, for humans dwarfed by the sheer spectacle surrounding them. A dozen holocams hovered around them, broadcasting their every move across the galaxy. At the far end of the arena, Overlord XY watched from his throne of fused bone and metal, his four arms folded in amusement. He had fought warlords, bio-enhanced assassins, and creatures engineered for slaughter. Now, he was being asked to fight humans. Vance didn't need to hear XY thoughts to know the warlord considered this a joke. Trial 1, the Gauntlet. A voice boomed through the arena, the Universal Combat Network's AI announcer, ensuring every spectator understood what was about to unfold. Challengers, prepare. Trial 1, survive the Gauntlet. The battlefield shifted beneath their feet, the solid floor breaking apart as towering metallic pillars surged upward. Some crackled with electricity. Others rotated like colossal blades. The space between them became a shifting maze of energy fields, spike pits, and high-speed drones armed with plasma cannons. Vance clenched his jaw. They'd have to navigate this death trap before they even got to XY. Move, he barked, and the team sprang into action. Sienna was already ahead, her mind calculating angles and trajectories at lightning speed. Left path. The energy fields cycle every 4 seconds. Watch for pulse. Vance followed her lead, dodging as a drone strafed overhead, its plasma bolt scorching the air. Sparky cackled as he grabbed a handful of explosives from his belt. You know what this place needs? less obstacles. He flung a charge at a rotating blade, the explosion disrupting its mechanism just long enough for Jonas to slip through. Jonas, bless his tactical brain, was already analyzing historical parallels. This reminds me of the labyrinth of Knossos, except, with more lasers. Fascinating, Vance grunted. But maybe hold a history lesson until after we're not being turned into paste? The crowd roared, entertained by the spectacle. The humans were supposed to be flailing, panicking, dying. Instead, they were adapting, turning the impossible into something survivable. Sienna hacked a control panel, forcing a plasma turret to turn on its own drones. Jonas used a broken piece of a drone's armor as a makeshift shield, deflecting a burst of energy just in time. Sparky? He was laughing as he set off chain explosions, clearing their path one controlled detonation at a time. They reached the final stretch, but the last obstacle was the worst, a 60-foot chasm, lined with spikes of charged antimatter. A single misstep meant instant vaporization. No way across, Jonas breathed. Sienna's eyes darted around. We make one. She grabbed a plasma conduit from a fallen drone, recalibrating its magnetic repulsors. You're not seriously going to... Vance started. Yup. She overloaded the device, sending a shockwave that collapsed part of the wall, creating a narrow bridge of fused metal. Go. Go. They sprinted across, the metal melting beneath their feet. Sparky was last, barely making the jump before the bridge dropped into the abyss. The buzzer sounded. The first trial was over. Trial 2. The beast was written all. The Colosseum reconfigured itself again, the walls retracting to reveal a massive pit of writhing creatures. 3's Rithnal wore beasts, their razor-edged tentacles twitching as they tasted the air. The announcer's voice rang out. Trial 2, slay the beasts. The crowd screamed in delight. These creatures had annihilated warriors twice their size. Humans? They were about to become snacks. Vance exhaled. All right, new plan. Jonas, still out of breath, wiped sweat from his brow. I'm guessing run is an option? Sienna assessed the monsters, her engineer's mind working fast. They have chitin armor, vulnerable at the joints. But their biggest weakness? She pointed upward. They rely on their echolocation. Sparky grinned. Oh, I can definitely mess with that. As the war beasts charged, Sparky lobbed a sonic grenade, overloading their sensitive receptors. The creatures shrieked in agony, thrashing wildly. Vance took his shot, a single well-placed plasma round into the first beast's exposed joint, sending it crashing down. Jonas sprinted forward, using one of Sparky's bombs to bait the second beast into ramming a collapsed pillar. The pillar crumbled, pinning the monster beneath it. The third creature lunged for Sienna, its tentacles whipping through the air. But she was ready. She activated her hack drone, sending a pulse of EMP energy that paralyzed the creature's nervous system. Vance fired the final shot, dropping the last monster. The arena fell silent for a brief moment. Then, a deafening cheer erupted. The human team had won again. XYRthak takes notice. From his throne, XYRthak finally leaned forward, his amusement shifting into mild intrigue. These humans were not brute strength. They were something worse. Clever. And that made them dangerous. He gestured to the announcer. The final trial was next. The battle against him. Vance, breathing heavily, looked toward the towering warlord and exhaled. All right, he muttered. Let's see if this guy regrets picking a fight with humanity. The Galactic Coliseum was the beating heart of interstellar combat, a place where civilizations measured their worth in blood. Suspended above a gas giant, its sheer scale defied logic. A monolithic arena capable of housing millions, its atmosphere thrumming with the cheers of alien spectators. Here, species from across the galaxy gathered to witness displays of strength, cunning, and ruthless spectacle. At the center of it all stood Overlord XYRthak, a titan among warriors. The Kraxan warlord was a nightmare-made flesh, 10 feet tall, his chitinous black armor gleaming under the artificial suns that illuminated the arena. For muscular arms flexed as he addressed the crowd, his voice a thunderous growl, carried through the Colosseum's neural amplifiers. I tire of these pitiful challengers. His mandibles clicked in irritation. No species has proven worthy of standing against me. Is there no warrior in this wretched galaxy who can provide me with a true battle? The audience roared in approval, a cacophony of alien dialects merging into a singular, eager hunger for violence. The Universal Combat Network, ever in pursuit of ratings, saw an opportunity. A real underdog story. A human would fight HFY, a challenge no one expected. Wait, what? Captain Elias Vance stared at the holographic summons glowing above his wrist communicator, his usually sharp mind struggling to process the sheer absurdity of it. You've been selected as humanity's representative in the Galactic Coliseum's trial of Dominion. The AI intoned cheerfully. Your participation is mandatory. Vance sighed, running a hand through his graying brown hair. He was a career strategist, not some hulking brute bred for gladiatorial combat. He had spent the last 15 years leading planetary defense missions and outmaneuvering pirates, not engaging in one-on-one duels to the death. But Earth's leaders had agreed. Humanity needed to prove itself. And so, Vance found himself in the armor war barge bound for the Coliseum, accompanied by three of the only people crazy enough to follow him into this disaster, the human wildcards. Dr. Sienna Patel adjusted the settings on her holo tablet, her dark eyes flicking between the dozens of schematics floating in the air. She had 3 PhDs, one in xenoengineering, and more common sense than the rest of them combined. This is a disaster, she announced flatly. We know, Vance replied. No, I mean statistically. The Kraxen have a 98.7% victory rate in the Coliseum. Not 100%, Marco Sparky de Leon interjected with a grin. The team's demolitions expert leaned against the bulkhead, twirling a plasma charge between his fingers. Sparky's philosophy in life was simple. If something couldn't be solved with explosives, you simply weren't using enough. We're not going there to blow up the arena, Sienna snapped. Speak for yourself. Vance rubbed his temples. Can we focus? He turned to the last member of their ragtag group, Jonas Dreamer. Kowalski was seated cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through a digital database of ancient human warfare. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of military history and an unsettling enthusiasm for historical battle tactics. If we look at this strategically, Jonas mused, we need to think like Sun Tzu. Strength alone won't win this fight. Fantastic, Vance muttered. Our grand plan is historical trivia and improvised bombs. The stakes are set. The war barge docked, and the team stepped into the blinding light of the Coliseum. The alien crowd erupted, a chaotic blend of jeers, laughter, and genuine excitement. A floating drone descended, broadcasting the rules in a metallic voice. The human will face a series of trials before engaging Overlord Xyrithak in combat. Victory grants humanity a place among the warrior races. Defeat, the AI paused and cheerfully added, means annihilation. Of course it does, Vance muttered. A holographic countdown flared above the arena. The first trial was about to begin. Vance exhaled. All right, team, he said. Let's show them what humans can really do. And with that, the battle for survival began.